And let's see.
I know it's Friday. I know we're all having a good time, but work is calling. Good morning. I would like to call the joint meeting of Senate Finance and Assembly Ways and Means to order. Happy Friday, and welcome to everybody joining us here in the committee room in Carson City and in Las Vegas, and those listening to us online. I am Senator Marilyn Dondero Loop, and I'll be chairing the meeting today. And so would the secretary please call the roll?
Assemblymember Anderson.
Present.
Assemblymember Backus.
Present.
Assemblymember Brown-May.
Here.
Assemblymember Dickman.
Here.
Assemblymember Hafen.
Here.
Assemblymember Hibbets.
Here.
Assemblymember Howdegi.
Here.
Assemblymember Koenig.
Here.
Assemblymember Mosca.
Here.
Assemblymember O'Neill.
Here.
Assemblymember Torres Fawcett.
Here.
Assemblymember Watts.
Here.
Assemblymember Yeager.
Here.
Senator Buck.
Here.
Senator Cannizzaro.
Here.
Senator Wen.
Here.
Senator Scheibel.
Here.
Senator Stone.
Here.
Senator Taylor. Senator Titus.
Here.
Assemblymember Monroe Moreno.
Here.
Chair Dondero Loop.
Here. And thank you very much. And please mark those that are not here present as they arrive. We have a few folks in and out today for bill hearings. Before we move on to today's budget hearings, I would like to remind you of the housekeeping items. Please silence your cell phones and electronic devices. Even if you're providing testimony today, please make sure that you state and spell your name for the record and each time that you begin to speak. And lastly, we will have a public comment period at the end of the meeting. Today we have two agencies on the agenda for the budget hearing. First, we'll hear from the Office of Project Management and Core NV, and then we'll go to the Cannabis Compliance Board. We will begin with the Office of Project Management and their presentation on the budget for Core NV. I would like to welcome Brian Bowles, Project Director for the Office of Project Management, and I believe Brady Phillips is with you, the administrator. So please come forward, and I will open up the hearing on Budget Account 1325, Core NV.
Thank you, Madam Chair, distinguished members of the committee. My name is Brian Bowles. I'm the Director of the Office of Project Management for the Core NV project. We're very excited to be here today to continue on the good work that we are doing here for the state of Nevada at OPM, and hope you enjoy our presentation. And without further ado, we'll get right going. So here is our interpretation with a little bit of AI wizardry of what this looks like for the state of Nevada moving forward into the future. And essentially, I've heard building the plane while you're flying it. Well, it almost seems like we're changing the engine out on a speeding car sometimes. So that's why we've kind of adopted this vehicle as our mascot. And we keep updating it and making it a little bit more futuristic every time we give a presentation. So the wonder of modern technology. So at base, our vision for the state of Nevada is to transition from fragmented human resources and financial systems and tools to a cohesive integrated platform through the implementation of a comprehensive statewide enterprise resource planning, or ERP system. We aim to streamline administrative functions and establish the groundwork for a government that is efficient and highly responsive. CGI Advantage 4 system will replace our current legacy systems, which are outdated and no longer meet the state's needs. This new system allows us to streamline our processes, reduce cost, improve data security, increase efficiency and productivity to make better decisions. By unifying and harmonizing our systems, Core NV will revolutionize the way Nevada operates, allowing us to eliminate redundancy, optimize workflows, and drive informed decision-making. This transformation will empower our public servants to focus on delivering exceptional services to the citizens and businesses of Nevada while ensuring fiscal responsibility and accountability. Together, we will forge a new era of operational excellence where seamless integration and advanced technology empower our workforce to meet the evolving needs of our state. Core NV is the cornerstone of our commitment to a future where Nevada's government operates at the forefront of efficiency, transparency, and effectiveness. Looking at Advantage 2, which is our legacy systems, and the two base systems that run the state's business, both financial and human resources. There were many challenges that the state experienced over the past 2+ decades using these systems. Now, while they've gotten us to today and have been amazing resources for the state, we have outgrown them. Having disparate systems with high maintenance costs, data in silos, with the data security risks that come with the modern environment, this is just a system that was in dire need of replacement, as we know for quite some time that the state has been working on this. For all of these challenges, Advantage 4 and the Core NV system provides a solution. So here are some of the system functionalities that we can enjoy to fix many of those challenges that we had before. And I'd like to call your attention to that center top bullet there that talks about consolidating data into a modernized system. And that is really where the power of a modern ERP truly lies, in that all of our data, which is currently in disparate places, in different systems that maintain their own databases and feed to external data warehouses, or in many agencies' offline processes that are stuck in Excel worksheets, or sometimes even in paper processes, our data is scattered all over the place. With the implementation of an ERP like Advantage 4, you're consolidating all of the state's core data into one place, one set of data for all of the different functionalities of all across our state enterprise to pull from and use. This eliminates many of the transition of data from one agency to another, one office worker to another. No more a piece of paper sitting on somebody's desk for a period of time. Once the data gets entered into the system, it is immediately available and usable to the next worker in the workflow that needs to grab that data. And that eliminates the potential for human data entry error, which is one of the great efficiencies of having all of your data in one place. That real-time visibility into all those system activities is really going to supercharge our operations moving forward. So how are we doing this? This initial platform deployment, or phase 1, you may also have referred to it in the past as MVP, or minimum viable product, is how we're doing this initial work on the project. Also referred to by slang as a lift and shift type operation. We are essentially taking our old operations and transitioning them to the bare minimum functionality that the new system affords in order to continue the state's business. We were very lucky and successful in our first implementation of the finance system, which went live on January 1 of this year. And we are working very hard towards phase 1B, which is the human resource implementation on June 30 of this year, right at the end of the fiscal year. We are also doing work right now on planning and moving forwards to phase 2. Phase 2 is our business transformation. We will be doing this transformation by gaining feedback from our state agencies that will be working in our new system to look for enhancements as we move forward, as well as adding on modules that have functionality that the state has never had within the system before, connected to the finance and human resources platforms. Things like travel and procurement, grants management, learning management solution and recruitment, applicant tracking, vendor self-service, employee and manager self-service, and eventually time and leave and budget planning, to name a few. And so this is what that looks like in a more granular look. Phase 1A, we delivered to you at the beginning of January, the finance-based system, general accounting, accounts payable, budget control, and a fixed asset management solution. And again, it is that minimum viable product that we need to just do the state's business, mirroring our old system. Phase 1B, which is coming at the end of June, will be the human resource management-based system, payroll administration, personnel administration, and position control. In future, in phase 2, some of the things I previously mentioned are all listed right there. That plus enhancements that we do, given the feedback from our state agencies and the work that our team at OPM does to realize the efficiencies of the new system, will be our charge for the next biennium. A look at the phase 1 timeline and where we have been and where we are going. You can see the small red line down there on 2025. We are here. We have just come out of the hypercare stabilization period for the finance implementation, and we are working hard toward the final phases and final work to get human resources up and running. I'd like to share with you at this moment a quote from our state's Chief Information Officer, Timothy Galuzzi, in a press release that his office put out on January 30th of 2025. And I think it might help illustrate the absolutely amazing work that the Office of Project Management and our vendor partners, CGI, Barry Dunn, and Plant Moran, have accomplished in the very short time that we have had to get this project live. Quoting, "In an industry where large-scale government technology projects often take 3 to 5 years, this team accomplished the impossible, delivering a fully operational system in just 15 months. At a special recognition event, Tim Galuzzi, Chief Information Officer for the state of Nevada, commended the team's extraordinary effort, perseverance, and technical expertise, highlighting their work as a national case study for other states looking to modernize their financial systems. Very few times in the world of technology do we have the opportunity to truly celebrate a win. You gave us that opportunity this month. What you accomplished in 15 months is nothing short of amazing. I already have states reaching out asking for lessons learned because what you've done is unprecedented." And that isn't hyperbole from our CIO, Tim Galuzzi. The unprecedented nature of what the OPM and CGI and our partners accomplished in the 15 months to get a successful go-live has never been accomplished in CGI's corporate history, taking a client from Advantage 2 and doing that lift up to Advantage 4. There were naysayers, frankly, within their corporate ranks, thinking that they had taken on too much. But the power of our collaborative effort, working together hand in hand over the last 15 months leading to that go live and then on into the future, has proven that we can absolutely do the unprecedented here in the state of Nevada. I think it is a moment to take and thank my staff and the staff of CGI, Plant Moran, and Barry Dunn that we've worked with. They have done an absolutely amazing, unprecedented job, and we certainly wouldn't be here today celebrating the success with you if it weren't for their individual efforts. And I know they're all watching back at the office right now, so thank you to everyone back at the office and everyone listening online. It is truly amazing. I would like to also, in just kind of driving this point home of the amazing work that has been done, if you look at the top of that phase 1 timeline in that white area, that represents the point in our project where we were coming off of the failure of Smart 21. There at the end of March in 2023, and that was when we made the decision to move away from Smart 21 and go back to the drawing board. Through that summer, April, May, June, and July, we were working with our executive committee and the purchasing division led by Administrator Gideon Davis to come up with new and innovative ways to do a procurement that was both legal and fast because we knew the clock was ticking. We were able to do that and get into contract by September and immediately begin work with our vendors with a kickoff in October. The work that and the speed and the success with which we've had is nothing short of amazing, and we should all be proud of our state staff that have made this accomplishment possible. All right, so where are we today? I'm sure there's some curiosity as to how the project is doing. I know there's been a lot of interest, and a lot of our reports that are out there on a public-facing website have shown all of the progress that we've made and the highs and the lows throughout the last 18 months that we've been working. But what you see in front of you right now are the most recent project health status indicators from each of the 3 vendors that we work with. The top one is Barry Dunn, who is our vendor for project management. They are part of the OPM team and we rely specifically on them for our project management services. This is their weekly status update as of this Tuesday. You can see that everything is in the yellow and green. We are in good shape moving forward. Overall, the project is graded by Barry Dunn and OPM as being in the yellow or cautious, which makes sense because we are in such a crash and small timeline to go live. You can see CGI's monthly status as of the same date, reporting on their work is also aligned with yellow and green. And most importantly, Plant Moran, our IV&V vendor, their latest monthly report, which describes the month of February, has us as well aligned with yellow and green. If you'll notice, One of the things here that has been our absolute rock has been our budget and cost. And if you were to go back and look at all of our status updates throughout the project, that is the one item that has consistently remained green, and that is due to the trust that this body and the legislature have put in OPM to get this project done with your partnership and the rock-solid funding that you have afforded us thus far. Now onto our stabilization period, a little bit of a description of some of the bumps and bruises that we undertook after we went live with the finance solution at the beginning of January. So just a note about that. We are, according to Plant Moran and Barry Dunn, both firms that are long in experience with IV&V and project implementation, completely within the realm of the normal when it comes to an implementation of this size and scope. Even if we were to have spent 3 to 5 years on this implementation rather than the 15 months, the incidents and tickets that we experienced would have been within the realm of the normal. What you're seeing before you is the total incident tickets by week, with week 1 being that first week of implementation in the beginning of January and moving through 9 weeks of time. And you can see how expectedly we had an initial ramp up of many tickets that came into the OPM. For context, OPM serviced Tier 4 tickets. Our Office of the Chief Information Officer was responsible for intake of all of these and handling things at a Tier 1. The state's Controller's Office would then be the escalation point for them for Tier 2 and Tier 3. And many of the tickets and requests for assistance that came in from our state agencies were handled at those lower levels. And these represent the Tier 4 things, or things that were unable to be handled by those lower tiers, or that they just didn't have the experiences they were learning on the job and building the plane while they were flying it as well. So you can see we had a grand total of 663 incidents logged at the Tier 4 level that OPM took care of in those first 9 weeks. The business impact severity of those is listed here. We have 5 in the critical, most of them 285 in medium, and going down from there. So there were many of these tickets, certainly, for the team to handle, but only very few of them were labeled critical or high compared to the total volume. At the end of the status at the end of the stabilization period, also referred to as the hypercare period, this was the status of those tickets. We had 80% in a completely done category, or 529 of those 663 were done. If you add the canceled and those that are in the scheduled for release or resolution review or ready for immediate prod release, you have well over 90% of those incidents and tickets handled within that stabilization period. And we feel very proud of the work that we did to immediately respond to all of the incidents and bugs and fixes and enhancements that were needed immediately post go live. So that is the end of, well, you hear me speaking, and now on to the actual budget presentation portion. I'm going to turn over to my colleague, Administrator Brady Phillips, for this. Thank you.
Good morning, all. Brady Phillips for the record. So I will go through 4 more slides regarding our budget request specifically. As you can see here on the top line, $98.8 million is our current ask. That is our total calculated dollar figure from AB 468 that still remains within the IFC Reserve Contingency Fund. I'm going to walk through what that will cover over the next 4 slides and why we're asking for that dollar figure. But it will cover our total anticipated operational and project costs for the next biennium within this dollar figure. And that outlines within our goal there on the 3rd line, which is to provide the best product to the state, but to also provide it within the original dollars attributed to the Core NV project and outlined within AB 468 during the last legislative cycle. All monies are requested at this point in a one-shot bill for both OPM and Core NV, and that is a bit of a change. We are not requesting any appropriated general or highway funding with this, and our intention is to cease existence on July 1, 2027 as an office of OPM. So we are looking at this one shot because there are no future ongoing costs specifically for OPM, and this is also how it has changed from the original GO1 you are familiar with OPM to the budget amendment that went through and changed it all over to the one-shot bill. So all monies requested will be reverted monies from AB 468 that are currently in this biennium with no new monies being requested. Our request for FY26 funding is going to be a request for immediate expenditure by the legislature within this one-shot bill. I have listed there out for you what the original GO1 was at that $66.5 million. This is just a reference point for you within this presentation. We are working with LCB analyst Mr. Malone, and that dollar figure is being brought into what the reality of FY26 is going to look like. As of right now, it's looking like that would be a lower dollar figure that we would ask for direct appropriation out of this one shot. The reason we're asking for that for FY26 is it would eliminate the need to go to IFC in June for things like payroll, benefits, our contractual costs starting July 1. But in turn, the last segment down there is that we would ask for the remainder of this one-shot bill to then be put in the IFC Reserve Contingency Fund, where we will go to IFC and request any additional funding we would need within FY26. We would also go in spring of 26 to request any funding we would need in FY 2027. And this continues our current funding methodology for Core NV. For the ongoing cost here, I just listed out some of the different items that you would typically see within GO1 and the general cost structure and how this goes. Our main outline there at the top are our vendor contract costs that we have currently underway. These may be different than some of the items you have in front of you or some of the materials that have been worked through with LCB, as we are currently and continuously doing change requests specifically on the CGI contract. Most of these do not include additional monies, but we have timelines on when monies are due to CGI based on products delivered. We are routinely changing those, and some would change between months, and thus it changes between fiscal years when those are due. One of these dollar figures that recently brought it up, we will go over, but it is bringing some of the monies from FY28 that would originally be due up to FY26 because it benefits the state on some of the resources CGI could then provide ahead of time to us, which thus increase the CGI dollar figure. However, that does not increase the overall dollar figure of the contract for CGI. It is just moving around when the due date is on those individual line items within the contract. All the other bullet points down below are the general outlined items as discussed. So salary and benefits, some of the operational costs, different contractors we utilize on project. As you get towards the last two bullet points, replacement laptops in accordance with the current schedule is the only equipment we are looking for in this current biennium. We're not requesting anything new because OPM is planning to cease existence moving forward. That replacement schedule is typically a 5-year, so it would be laptops that are over 5 years old that would be replaced in that. And then language access services is a new item. We did go to IFC this year and request funding from that bill from last legislative session. We have utilized some language access services for our training program for the employees who are hard of hearing and need translators in class to actually pick up the material and move forward. And for our last slide here, these are some of those projected costs that are above and beyond just the standard cost to the project and what we are looking to do moving forward into the next biennium with our phase 2. There's only one item on this tab that I'm going to pull out and really explain to you because I know it is going to be of concern, and that is the Core NV Production Environment Operations team you see about halfway down the page for approximately $5.8 million. This does include 18 FTE positions at the state throughout the next biennium, 7 within the first year, and 11 within the second year, coming to 18 total. Why we're looking at this, I'm going to run some more numbers for you, but Director Bowles provided to you that we handled 663 tickets there between January and February at OPM. Currently, there is no production team. So our team that is doing the project build and moving Core NV forward throughout our process is also the one supporting the live environment system right now. Those 663 tickets took a significant amount of time from our team, which means they were not focused on the build and moving forward. They were focused on supporting the statewide system. This team would support that statewide system. So any of those tickets coming forward from each of our additional rollouts would then be supported by this team, and the future ongoing support needed for state agencies and state employees would also be supported by this team. Then there comes a whole other side of this that with technology programs and software of this nature, where the software is needing support moving forward for bugs, fixes, security updates, new features, and things of that nature. The way CGI operates with their Advantage program, Core NB is based off of, is that they release 3 feature sets per year. 2 of those feature sets are major changes, updates, fixes, and things of that nature as discussed. And they have line items of over 2,000 items per update for each of those 2. There is a 3rd feature set that is released every year, and that includes all of the tax updates. So that is a little bit smaller. It is not that 2,000 line item. But in between each of those 3 updates, they also release what are called interim containers to give us the patches and fixes that we need more immediately. And each of those are around 200 line item fixes. So this team would be charged and tasked with taking care of each of those items to make sure the state is always up to date and moving forward. And in the end, if we had done this with Advantage 2, we would not be in the situation where we are today trying to build into this Advantage 4 program, because that would continue through that process over the years. However, to give you a little bit more of an idea of what it takes to process each of those items moving forward, for each of the line items, the team would have to review the line items. They would have to make a decision on the application of each line item to the state of Nevada. And a lot of that would be reaching out to stakeholders, such as if it is a purchasing issue, reaching out to the people at the purchasing division to determine how it actually affects the state. If it is an audit issue, reaching out to those people at the state controller's office to determine how it affects the state. Coming back and testing and doing what we call regression testing of each of those items to make sure that when we put that into the production environment, it doesn't crash the environment statewide. So we actually have to test each of those line items. We then have any of the new features that CGI rolls out, we have to make a determination, do we actually turn those on or do we leave those turned off? If we decide to turn them on, again, we have to go through testing to make sure it does not crash the system. Lastly, for testing, we actually have to load the entire feature set into a test environment and go out to our stakeholders throughout the state at all of the different agencies and have them test each of their different business practices. DHHS operates differently from DPS, which operates differently from the controller's office, and so forth throughout the state. When you go to each of those agencies, they may use a field on the finance system slightly different. They may do a different amount of input, a different style of input. They have different people doing the approval process. Each of those are their different process changes that are done. When we update the system, we have to make sure that the different processes at the different agencies, again, does not crash the system. So we do all of this in a test environment, making sure that everything is copacetic before we actually roll it out statewide. Once all that is done, we then have to communicate these new changes statewide to make sure that everyone is aware of what is coming out. So we need someone on that team to be able to communicate and share this information. We also need training officers, because each time these come out, it updates the training materials with the new features or the changes to the system, and then provide training statewide to those users who need that new information or need training on it, or to provide a new e-learn course. Lastly, it would move to the production environment, and then this team would provide oversight to make sure that everything went in proper and prudently, and that there were no issues moving forward. So this is a large undertaking that is routine in nature and consistently ongoing, hence we need a team with it. As you can see at the end of my bullet point, it says future to OCIO. In our current governance plan that we have outlined, this would start at OPM, run under our roof, be a slow changeover from project to this production environment team as we hire people on, get them trained, or transition people from the project team over to the production team moving forward, so that we have that continuity between teams. And then once OPM ceases to exist, these are the 18 positions that would continue with state service. These are the FTEs that would continue, and they would eventually transfer over to OCIO. And that would be undertaken in the next legislative session on how that would roll into OCIO and how funding would continue for that process moving forward. With that, that is the end of my presentation, and I stand for questions.
In just one moment before we get to that, I just want to let the committee know that you
Mr.
have...
Bowles, will you say your name for the record?
I'm sorry. My apologies. Brian Bowles for the record. Thank you. We have quite a team of supporters behind us that are also available to speak to you if you have questions for them. We have our members of our executive committee, State Controller Andy Matthews, and GFO Director Tiffany Greenemeyer. We also have our Executive Budget Officer, Michael Rankin. We have the State CIO, Tim Galuzzi, is either here or on the way. He is here. and his deputy CIO, Darla Dodge. We also have two of the executives from CGI here, if you would wish to speak to them. That is Kim Terabetz and Greg Hussey. We all now stand for any questions that you may have, and we are all available to come up to the table and speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you both for your information. And we do have questions from the committee. And I believe first is Assemblymember Monroe Moreno.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'll scoot over here. It was a very rosy presentation. Thank you for that. However, I've sat on this committee for a number of sessions, and when we had the discussion about Core NV, we had the discussion about changing to Core NV because of problems we've had with other IT projects, and tons and tons and tons of money. And the discussion last session in making the transition is that we were definitely going to hold people's feet to the fire as we transition to Core NV. You told us all the good things. You didn't say anything about the problems that you've had. So before we even go into the budget questions, I want to know the problems that you've had, the obstacles that you've had in this. Have departments had issues with patches, fixes, payroll, tax payments, purchasing payments, all of that? I want to know the details because in previous legislative bodies, we haven't gotten those details and we've spent millions and millions of dollars, right? And gone timelines that have gone on and on and on and on. And you have this little green star. I hope and pray that we finish this project on time, but nothing in the state ever does. I'm hoping this is the one project that does, but I really want to know what have been some of the obstacles, the hurdles, and the problems that you've had specifically.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Brian Bowles, Director OPM for the record. We've had quite a few. It's been a harrowing 18 months of project work, to be honest. In a project that takes 3 to 5 years in normal conditions, to do that in the period of 15 months, and then if you had HR on 21 months, is truly unprecedented. And there are many things that go by the wayside when you have to make decisions about doing something this quickly. Looking back over the project, if I could stay at a high level for a moment, and I will get into some of the details of what we've experienced after go live. One of the things that had to go by the wayside, which would be normal for a project of this type, is a robust business process analysis. That is where project teams would spend more than a year, in many cases, going out to our stakeholders and determining what is the as-is state of your process and requirements gathering so we can understand exactly what are all the requirements before we begin any kind of build and implementation. We had to basically scrap that entire process. That has led to a lot of bumps and bruises along the way. Our overall methodology, which is not normal for a project of this nature, was to accept the out-of-the-box functionality of Advantage 4. And so when we went into the requirements and discovery meetings that we had throughout the last 18 months, we were not approaching our stakeholder agencies with, tell me everything how you do it right now, and then doing configurations and code changes to the system, which would be a more normal methodology. We showed them what the system could do out of the box, and we asked them to see if their processes would fit into that box. And where we were able to configure to meet those needs, we absolutely did. Where we were unable, we asked the agencies to change their process. And that has been one of the guiding points of vision that has changed from Smart 21 to Core NV. That has led to our success. It is the direction that has come down from our leadership, and we have maintained it through the project that the state will change its process. And we will even endeavor to change regulation if need be, or even enter a bill draft resolution to change statute if need be, although we have not had to do either of those things with our analysis thus far. But that is the level of resolve that we had to make sure that we took an out-of-the-box MVP system and we modernized our state processes. It created a lot of friction with our stakeholder agencies. And that's friction that the teams had to endure and are still enduring to this day with our constituent agencies that we work with. So while the project eventually became successful with our on-time implementation and will again with our HR implementation at the end of June, it's not without the friction and some of the negative feelings that go along with going so fast and being so resolute in our vision that the state will change, the agencies will change their process. And in many ways, it's been very painful. I'm sure you could bring Chief Deputy Controller Smack up here and ask him how it's affected his agency, and Controller Matthews. They are undergoing the change right now where they have to figure out new ways of process within their agency. That is painful. There are state agencies, all of our state agencies, that are now working in this finance solution. While it is more modern, it does do a bunch of things that they didn't have access to before with functionality. They're also undergoing the pain of adoption. They're undergoing looking at their processes and throwing their policies and procedures potentially into draft so that they can rewrite those, and they're doing that while maintaining their current operations. This is painful. It has been, like I said, a rough 18 months for our project team. Many of them are burnt out, and there's more work to be done. But that is being visited now upon our state agencies as we've asked them over the last 18 months and informed them that they are going to be part of our project team, because the work of the project and the work of dragging the state into the future that this project is doing is impacting them in their individual work units. And that is really front and center for them now since we've gone live. And so those are problems. And they're not always met with open arms. Change is hard. And our state agencies are feeling it, and we feel very empathetic with all of them. We speak with them all of the time through all of their submission of tickets and calling for help, and us, leaning in to fix it for them, and all of the meetings that we have ongoing. But I can tell you that the leadership of the state agencies that we've engaged with are resolute with us. We are working hand in hand, and there have been a lot of bumps and bruises. Now on to some more of the details you asked for, ma'am. When we went live, there were a number of things that we knew we were going to miss. Going this fast in a project of this size and scope and complexity, there's really no way of getting it perfect. And as I mentioned earlier, what we experienced was within the range of normal in the project management world, even if we'd spent 3 to 5 years, which is why we count this as a major success, even though we had so many issues. We only had one pass through testing, and it was a very shortened testing period. We only had one pass through training. So the user adoption and understanding how to use this system to do operational jobs was really, I'm going to be honest, it was a very surface pass through training. And so many of the problems and issues experienced by our state workers were due to inexperience and learning a new system on the fly. There were also issues with our interfaces. We made, dozens and dozens of interfaces, but it only takes, one capitalized A instead of a lowercase a, which actually was an issue that we had in an interface. An error of that tiny that gets through testing that creates a major impact because it can throw out transactions. It can have major impacts, and we saw those. One of the issues that I know made it to the press and has made it to your visibility is that there were issues with the deductions from our payroll and all of the vendors that get paid as a result of the deductions from our state workers' payroll. Those are things like child support and VOIA, deferred compensation, and all of the things essentially that come out of your payroll. That was an issue with one of our interfaces. It had the wrong bank code attached to it. So as the payroll, and apologies if you know this already, perhaps you don't, I had to learn it. We're running payroll in our old legacy system even today. That is what we were replacing in June. And so that payroll file, once it gets created into a pay file, goes out from the old system to our controller's office, treasurer's office for those validations, goes to the bank, and our employees get paid. The bank file then comes back to the state, and that is what gets input into the accounting system to account for all of that pay file. So it comes back into Advantage 4 now, and there was an issue with the interface of that pay file coming back in, and then that is where we would then distribute those payments to the vendors. So it was that interface coming back in from the bank file to Advantage 4 that caused those vendors not to get paid for that particular pay period. When we found that, when we discover any particular issue or problem, the team dove on it immediately. I believe that fix was accomplished in 3.5 to 4 business days. So yes, there was impact, and that is extraordinarily regrettable. We knew we were going to have bumps and bruises, or very negative impacts as a result of going live. You always do in these projects. The part that gave us pause, and as I suppose it does with every project implementation, is you don't know where the mistakes are until you step on them, until they arise in front of you. And so our hypercare period, we knew we were going to go through it, and we knew we were going to put the state through it for a little bit. And that is exactly what occurred. That is not the only interface that had issues. There were other interfaces that had issues. There was one particular issue that we had for interfaces where we had to change 16 interfaces with the same fix because there were PO and PV or what we call payment voucher, purchase order type information coming from state agencies into the new system that again had an incorrect bank code. Those had to be fixed, 16 interfaces within a week. We have an amazing developer that dove on that and got that done in short order. And so I can say, we have, with regards to going into the details, I probably have some more for you. We can certainly provide this body with an itemized list of many of the tickets that we had going through. But I'm hoping that answer sufficed for you, ma'am. I could certainly go into more if you'd like.
So you said a lot, with the interface problems and things like that, but I don't know if other members received calls and emails, but I did. We had employees who were not paid. Do we know how long it took to get those employees paid, to get payroll items fixed? Those employees, many of them live paycheck to paycheck, and they incurred other costs. Were we able to help them with that? How many of our vendors did not receive payment in a timely manner? And then also, how many vendors owe us money that we're still waiting on money to come in because of problems with that? Could you elaborate on that?
Brian Bowles for the record. Again, thank you for the question. The payroll issues are actually not a result of us going live with the finance system. The way our payroll works is that it comes out of the legacy system, and that is Advantage 2, and that is what we are seeking to update and move off of in June. Through analysis of that payroll, I believe, and I'm speaking for another agency here with the HRM who has control of this, but we are intimately involved in working with them for every payroll because there are a majority of the technical support for our pay cycles comes from our staff because we have the subject matter experts on project that are the same people that are keeping our payroll up and going. All of those that we were able to do analysis on over the last number of months were data entry errors at central payroll that caused issues with that pay run. And that is our legacy system that we're trying desperately to move away from. And so the fact that we had payroll issues are the same payroll type issues that we've been exposed to for the last number of years with our legacy system. As the state is outgrowing these systems, we are pushing up against the limits of that system and its ability to conduct the business that we need it to. It's very technical, and I could get into the reasons why. It essentially has to do with the nightly cycles and how big they have become over the years, given the amount of data that we're putting in and the amount of changes that we've had to make over the years that cause those to run so slow and are so complicated. Suffice it to say, the pay issues that we experienced are not because of the project. The project is seeking to remedy that for the state by our Phase 1B implementation.
So it's not because of the interfacing between the old project and the new one coming on?
Brian Bowles, for the record. No, ma'am.
And then vendors. You didn't mention anything about vendors. Could you explain a little bit more about them?
Certainly.
And then I'm going to go into taxation.
Brian Bowles, for the record. As far as vendors go, we don't have an accurate way at the project level to determine how many vendors are still out, haven't paid into us. That would be a particular agency by agency question, because that data would be coming in through our operational agencies. We know that a number of vendors were not paid throughout our hypercare period because of largely inexperience of our state staff, as I mentioned before, in training how the system works. Many of the interfaces were involved. The one I mentioned before with needing to change 16 interfaces, those were payment vouchers that would have gone on to pay vendors that were stuck as a result of that incorrect interface, which we fixed. I couldn't speak to the number of vendors, but from those agencies and those interfaces, when they bounce off of the system due to an error, that's all of them that are coming in from that agency at that time. There are ways in the system in which agencies are now learning that they need to screen and look at their transactions coming in and see which ones are stuck in pending, which means that the transaction hasn't gone from the draft data entry position through all of its levels of approval and gone to final. Once a financial transaction goes to final, it then gets uptaken in the nightly cycle that night and is processed for payment to the bank. The fact that those transactions have been stuck in pending for many state agencies have a multitude of reasons why those happen. Some of them interface related, some of them issue and like bug fix related that we have remedied to this point. Many of them training related. Some of those transactions that we see in the system that agencies are working towards fixing are just those. They are a backlog that occurred during that first month that these agencies are still working towards. When we find those, and the project team, the production support team, actually monitors the system as well on a statewide enterprise level and pulls those reports and looks into the system to see globally how many pending transactions are out there. What is the date and age of those? Do we have a particular agency that looks like they need help because their transactions are too old? Our project team will actually proactively reach out to those agencies, and with our staff that understand how to push these things through with the new system, we are doing white glove service with those agencies to assist their staff directly by using screen sharing to show them exactly how to move their transactions to final. And we've had amazing success over that hypercare period and up to this date, engaging with these agencies to get their vendors paid, because that is the business of the state. The rosy part of that is, while there are many bumps and bruises, there are many calls to your constituents over the last few months. That was expected. We did process over $48 million in payments on the very first day that we turned this on. By the end of January, we were over $1 billion in payments out the door. I don't have the stats in front of me, so I won't say a specific number, but we just pulled it for the 2 months in total, and at the end of February, very beginning of this month, we were over $2 billion in money going out the door, paid to our vendors in the state. So we are paying our bills. There have certainly been incidences where there have been delays in payment as a result of the system. And I would just offer that that's always been the case in the state. There have always been times for various reasons that the system has done something that have caused delays, whether it be at the agency level or the system level. It certainly has piled up on us in the last month because of this implementation, but we believe we're on top of it now, ma'am.
Madam Chair?
Please go ahead.
Okay. So at this point, have we fixed the problems with payroll, that they're, the training, whatever was going wrong there? Has that been resolved at this point as we're making this transition? And then you said you didn't have the total number of vendors before you today, but if you could get that to us, because, that could be 5 vendors, could be 500 vendors, 5,000 vendors. I'd really like to know what that is. So I'll let you answer that first.
Brian Bowles from the record. We will absolutely do that analysis for you and get that to you, ma'am.
All right. Taxation. We're coming up to an economic forum, right? And we need accurate numbers from taxation in every department so that they can give us a forecast of how much money we really have to deal with to end this session and sign and die and do great work here in the state. But there is a problem in taxation right now. Is that a problem with the Core MV system, or is there a problem with the interface with their new taxation system? Could you let us know what that issue is right now?
Brian Bowles for the record. Thank you for the question, ma'am. We don't know. This is a new breaking issue. In fact, I've just heard of it this morning at my level. We may have a ticket on it in our system that has not risen to my desk at this point. Knowing that taxation did just do their own new implementation of the Mint system. I know they have amazing success with that, but like any software implementation, there are likely issues there. We do have one interface with Mint and Core NV. If there are issues there, we will dig into that and determine where the problem lies and certainly help them through whatever issue that they're having. If it's internal to Mint, that would be a question for taxation, ma'am. If it's with the interface, that is on our side of the fence, and we will go back to the office and get you information on that and dig into figuring out what is the issue, and we will solve it.
Well, there's definitely an issue, and one that we definitely need to solve in a much sooner than later, so we could do the work of the people. Now, I do have questions on the budget, Madam Chair, and thank you for your indulgence. About the Phase 2 implementation. Let's see here. There's $10 million in American Rescue Plan funds that were allocated for Core MV. How much has been spent so far, and do you anticipate being able to spend the entire $10 million before the federal expenditure deadline, which is December 31st of 2026?
Brady Phillips for the record. We spent all but $185 in FY 2024. That $185 was rolled forward to this fiscal year and has already been allocated to one of our invoices, so we are fully paid on fully utilized ARPA funding.
I love hearing that. Thank you. And then my final question, thank you. Do you anticipate utilizing the remaining $8.7 million for the change control work order from FY 25?
Brady Phillips for the record. As discussed during the presentation, that number that we're looking at FY26 is currently in fluctuation because that change control is constantly in motion. We do have some change requests that have been requested from CGI that would impact that dollar figure. We do not know what would come out of FY25 right now or be requested for the next biennium. We're hoping to finalize some of those numbers immediately. We know that out of the 10 million we have, 2.5 has already been committed for training. We're looking at another 2.5 or slightly thereover as committed for NeoGov implementation for our recruiting and learning management system. We just don't know what the impact is right now on this fiscal year versus future fiscal years for that NeoGov one. The training management one we have completely outlined. And that 1.3 that is missing is exactly that.
Thank you. And when you do get a better idea of that, would you get that to our staff so they can give that information to all the members?
Brady Phillips, most definitely. We'll work through Mr. Malone to get that to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will go to Assemblymember Hadigi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here and answering our questions. I have some questions similar to my colleagues just on some of the delays that were experienced. I know that during the rollout of Phase 1A, there was some delays in getting NDOT on board just because there was interface issues. And so now they've been pushed back to the 1B rollout. Because we're adding to the the rollout of 1B, are we expecting any delays or anyone being pushed back into phase 2? So basically, what kind of delays is adding NDOT to 1B going to cause for the rollout?
Thank you for the question, ma'am. Brian Bowles from the record, through the chair to you. Moving NDOT into phase 1B wasn't just because of an interface issue. We're really doing 2 implementations of a financial system and putting them into one. If you can consider the controller's office and their instance of Advantage 2 that we did replace as a round peg into a round hole, NDOT has proven to be a square peg, trying to put them into the same round hole that we just implemented. NDOT uses functionalities in their instance of the legacy system Advantage 2, which is what they're still operating on today, in many ways that the state proper did not. Many ways, cost accounting, agreements, so forth. Their use of that legacy system is extraordinarily larger and more complicated than the state proper uses. It is those functional areas, cost accounting, agreements, and a few others, that were extra work, extra implementation, extra build, that the project team was unable to accomplish in the time of phase 1A. And that's why they were moved out 6 months. That work has been ongoing with NDOT, and certainly adding another implementation, another set of data conversion, another set of training, another set of testing to the same timeline as human resources poses risk. It actually poses great risk. To that end, and this is late breaking news, I suppose, but over the last few weeks, the project team, led by our executive committee and the governor's office, we took another hard look at that. We determined that NDOT was actually stable on their old system, a lot more stable than the state proper was with the controller's office version of their Advantage 2. So we made the decision just a few weeks ago to move NDOT off another 6 months. We are going to be moving them to what we call phase 1C, and their implementation will now be the 1st of January of 2026. Or excuse me, 2026 for their finance. They will be going along with us in phase 1B, as will the rest of the state for the human resources piece.
Follow up, Madam Chair? Yes. Okay, so on the slide that you had, I think it's slide 6, you have a phase 1A, phase 1B, and a phase 2. So you're talking about a phase 1C now. I'll let you get there. So the one before. There we go. So we see a phase 1A, a phase 1B, and then we see a phase 2. So where is phase 1C, and what's the timeline for that, and who else falls into the phase 1C category?
Brian Bowles for the record. Thank you for the question. So we actually made the decision a lot after we built the slide deck, to be honest with you. And so phase 1C, we just came up with that name and memorialized it within our project yesterday. And so it is very late breaking for us. That's why you don't see it on this slide. The timeline for that is, as I just mentioned, we anticipate bringing NDOT into our financial system and sunsetting their instance of Advantage 2 at the end of this calendar year. So 6 additional months from what Phase B would have contemplated. And there is nobody else involved in what we're calling Phase 1C that is specific to NDOT. However, Phase 2 will be underway by that time, and there are intended deployments of some of the modules we discussed earlier for the business transformation along those same timelines. That's one of the things Mr. Phillips mentioned as being one of the change requests that CGI is working on currently so that we can do the proper planning and scheduling of our Phase 2.
Okay, and then just one more question. So because we are moving NDOT, then we don't expect any other delays to anyone else who's on the rollout of Phase 1B. We expect Phase 1B to go live June 30th, 2025 with everyone on there.
Brian Bowles for the record. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then just to make sure I wrote it down correctly, you said that Phase 1C would launch 6 months after that, so January 1st, 2026 with NDOT?
Brian Bowles for the record. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. That answered all my questions.
Thank you very much. And Assemblymember Watts, did you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it very brief. I have just a quick comment and then a question. And, first of all, I want to say, Mr. Bull, I really appreciate all the work that you're doing. It comes through that you're pushing hard. I think we know that it's an extremely aggressive timeline, and you're working diligently to keep us on that timeline and to keep us on budget. And that naturally means things are going to come up and have to be addressed throughout the process. I will say, and we know that there's reporting requirements to the Interim Finance Committee. I think especially as we're seeing these rollouts, it would be really helpful for us to get information and updates on some of these items. For example, the question that the majority leader just asked, so that it doesn't kind of come out as a surprise when we're going through questions. So that we get that on the front end. Similarly, we'd like to be able to find out some of this information before it hits the media. So that's kind of my comment. And related to that, you mentioned and included in your slide deck kind of the latest weekly reports. Great to see those. I went and looked on the website where some of the reporting is. And the last report available is in January. And so the question I have is, can you tell us what the general schedule is for getting those reports posted so that we can kind of follow along? I know there's always going to be a bit of a lag time, but it's helpful for us because sometimes we go and we see a report that's from 2 or 3 months ago, and it doesn't necessarily reflect where we're at. And so without asking for us to get all the weekly updates, can you just provide some detail on when, if we want to go and see kind of the most recent report, what the timeline is for getting those posted for the information of us and members of the public as well?
Brady Phillips for the record. We've recently changed the way that our vendors are reporting back to our executive committee. In the past, both Barry Dunn does a weekly report. CGI was doing a monthly report. That was always the second Tuesday of the month. And Plant Moran was doing a monthly report, and that was always the fourth Tuesday of the month. So typically, those are for the prior month because the month completes, they do the report, and then they actually come and present on it. We recently changed, so now both Plant Moran and CGI are doing the second Tuesday of the month to our executive committee. So as you can see, the information that Mr. Bowles put forward was for the February report because it was presented on March 11th, 12th, whichever that Tuesday was there. After that presentation goes, the vendors then actually deliver their final report. And we wait until we have all 3 reports to release on the webpage. The reason being is that you will see on some of them, they have redactions on them. Some of those we do redactions in-house just to remove names and keep it simple on that end. Other CGI does redaction on their end due to business espionage concerns on their end. So they do their redactions on their business practices that they don't want their competitors to see, then deliver it to us. Once we do all the redactions, then we have to do remediation before we can post to the website for ADA accommodations. So our typical timeline was the following first week of the month. So they were always 4 to 5 weeks behind schedule. We're hoping now to bring that up 1, maybe 2 weeks because of the change in Plant Moran's reporting date. However, that will be yet to be seen because this was the first month with all of them on the second Tuesday.
Thank you very much. And I believe Senator Taylor, did you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the presentation. I was presenting a bill, so I missed it, but I have a couple of questions. I just want to make sure I'm tracking, so forgive me if this is repetitive. Chair, with your indulgence, I can get, thank you so much. I'm wondering, I walked in towards the end of this, and I had a question to, I know there were some delays in paying staff and vendors and so on. Are we still having delays?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Brian Bowles, for the record, through the chair to you. Right now, we believe the majority of the delays have been remedied. The further delays that may be experienced, I would attribute to operational agencies and their process. We have addressed every issue that has come our way that we did cover earlier. We are well over 90% complete and done with all of the incidents that have come into Core NV over the last 2 months. And those were largely related to the delays that were reported. So we believe that the state is stabilized with the adoption of this new platform, and that they are able to do business. There are still some issues that we are working on ongoing, and we are working with those agencies for those particular delays. But without detail on the particular delay that you may be speaking of, I couldn't offer an opinion specifically, but we saw many delays through the stabilization period that we addressed, and we believe we have addressed the vast majority of those, ma'am.
Okay, I appreciate that. I do have another question, Madam Chair. Again, I'm just trying to track. So I know on the Advantage 4, you initially had a phase of the financial component that it will be done February 2026. And then on the Advantage for HR piece, the goal for that was August 31st, 2026. And then there was a change, right? Instead of doing two big ones, you're going to do some smaller modules along the way. Can you have an updated timeline as to when, now the new dates for when those can be expected?
Thank you for the question, Brian Bowles, for the record, through the chair to you, Senator. We don't have it ready for public consumption yet. It is one of the change requests that CGI and OPM are still working on to do the planning and reordering of phase 2 with all of the scheduling and when each module is going where. I can tell you that work began last fall with prioritization at the executive level so that we could determine which modules coming into the state at the particular month made sense for the way the state's operational cadence moves over a biennium, so that we're not dropping things in willy-nilly. We're putting things where they would be of most use during that particular time of the year. Once we get that change request inked and approved, then we would release that new timeline to you all and anybody who wanted to see. But that will be our work to get that final change request to reorder phase 2 done. And you are correct, Senator, we went from what was originally contemplated as 2, I don't know if they're big bangs, but smaller bangs where we do everything basically into deployments, one all concentrated on finance and one all concentrated on human resources. We're now scattering human resources and finance module deployments in the area that makes the most sense. Our current timeline for that is we have notionally a target of June 30th, 2027 being the final deployment and the final day of OPM's existence on the same day. So we're planning to work right up to the final hour.
Thank you, Ms. Bowles. I appreciate that. Chair, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And with that, I believe we might have a question from Assemblymember Mosca.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have a few. That's okay? Yes. Okay, thank you so much. Well, thank you as well again for all your hard work and learning more about this. My questions are on what you're describing and discussing on the last slide. And so I just want to make sure I understand, and for the record, and I know you discussed it, but for me to understand why the support and maintenance of core NV is being moved to that OCIO.
Brady Phillips, for the record. Thank you for that question. It's the way the governance plan is currently set up is moving forward, OCIO would oversee the technology piece of the project when it is in full production. SCO, STO, DHRM would still be involved in their capacities as the HR or financial side of the house, and they would be working in tandem with OCIO. However, OCIO is the technology office, and this is a technology program that is on an enterprise side, so it has been determined they would be the best house.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense to me. And so my question then was, is it the intent that all 47 staff personnel then be transferred when the project is complete, or will the office eliminate those positions?
Thank you for the question, Brian Bowles, for the record, through the chair to you. The intent is to bring these 7 in year 1 and then another additional 11 in year 2 to staff up this unit, with the intent that this unit be the one that moves on into the future at OCIO to provide production support. Obviously, the most qualified and desirable staff members to move the system into the future are going to be ones that are currently on project. So it is our intent over the next biennium to offer those positions as we hire them first for internal promotional. so that we can move staff somewhat off project and into this production support role. The reality is, if any of those staff members elected to stay on and continue to make Core NV part of their career's life moving forward, we would still have them on project to do project work. And so it is the work of myself and CIO Tim Galuzzi and his staff to determine when's the best moment to fill those positions, to bring them off project and into the production team. And it is our intent to use this slow transition over the next biennium to start to ramp OPM down. So it is our intent then to, where appropriate, not backfill positions if we can stand the loss on the project team, knowing that that person is still going to be within the walls of OPM and still able to provide support for the project. And so if you can just imagine over the next biennium, we intend that to be a slow ramp down of OPM and a ramping up of this production support unit. However, acknowledging that our FTE complement at OPM is 29 and the new unit is 18. Also that we built the concept of the production unit with the class specifications and grades that seemed appropriate for an ongoing production support unit. Those do not match one-to-one with the FTEs and class specifications and grades that we have on project. So there is some mismatch. We do anticipate needing to potentially pull some people outside of the project into those new positions as appropriate, and having a complement of OPM staff members that will need rehoming once OPM is gone. So it is something that is definitely an action item for myself and for our executive committee and the governor's office to ensure that every single one of our staff members, when we're done with the project, has the right placement within state service. And that will be the work of the next 2 years for us as well.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. That kind of leads into just my last question, and I appreciated the picture of the engine and that you are, going full speed and changing out while we're doing all this. So knowing about all that you just talked about and everything that you still have to do with the system, how do you anticipate balancing the workload of moving over to the OCIO and continuing all the regular work that you're doing?
Thank you for the question, ma'am. Brian Bowles, for the record, through the chair to you. A lot of the things that you heard Mr. Phillips talk about, most notably moving that section of local support services in our contract from CGI from the fiscal year 28, which is the end of the contract period, forward into now, which shifts the liability from that contract forward into fiscal year 26. Those individuals are anticipated to come on and be required to be that production support unit in the near term. So the work from the project team that has been sapping our capacity over the last number of months, we anticipate in the short term to be shouldered by these folks that we would be bringing on from CGI, already experienced there. And these particular individuals, due to the terms of our contract, are actually accountable to the state for their direction and not directly from CGI. So they come on board as essential contractors under the main contract to do what the state wishes them to do and assigns them to do. We would assign them that production support role. So we would have this germ of the team being handled by CGI in the near term, while we, if we are successful with our budget hearing with you all, moving forward into hiring the folks or moving the folks over into that new production support unit, having the CGI complement train them on the job as we move forward. One of the nice things about that local support services in CGI's contract is that we can move them in and out with their skill sets and the actual people inhabiting those roles as the state needs. So while those folks would be anticipated to start as that production support unit, as we stood our own up over the next biennium, we could phase those folks into other areas of need for the project, and that's how we would account for the capacity, ma'am.
Thank you very much. And I believe Assemblymember Watts has a couple of questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So you did talk about this, but I'm also trying to kind of wrap my head around this a little bit. So there's now a proposal to have IFC transfer funds to the office's operating budget instead of allocating revenues directly to the budget. Can you just explain a little bit more why we're taking that approach?
Brady Phillips, for the record. We can bring Director Greenemeyer up here to explain more if needed. However, I will take a first approach at this. When GO1 came out, it was originally anticipated that funding from the IFC contingency was going to be direct within GO1, and that it was an improper method. So when the budget amendment was completed, it was taken over to a one-shot because that's how the funding could actually be accomplished, by reverting all the AB 468 and moving it into a one-shot bill moving forward, which puts us where we are without the direct appropriations that we have.
Okay, so then again, with these pieces, can you talk about what expenses are going to be directly appropriated, and then what is going to be covered through, and what's going to be placed in the IFC contingency account? What's kind of the breakout there?
Yes, Brady Phillips, for the record. All of the ongoing costs are what we're asking for is the directly appropriated. So the salaries, the operational costs for the office, the general OPM overhead costs, and then also our contracted costs with our vendors that we currently have, as well as the ongoing that we have utilized over these past 2 years for contractors and things of that nature to supplement our team and actually accomplish this mission within the timeline. The items going into the reserve contingency are any of the additional funds for FY27 that we would go back and request, or in any of the additional charges for enhancements or changes of phase 2 as we move forward that would not be included within our standard contract language.
Thank you. And then, so you discussed essentially the eventual transition of, I guess, those 18 positions into ongoing support after we've kind of finished the build out. And can you clarify whether that's going to be supported, if that's going to be supported with one-shot dollars? Again, I get that there's kind of a line there because we've got the project itself, but then those positions will move into being ongoing support. Can you just provide some clarity on if those are going to be supported with one-shot dollars, and if so, why, and how you plan to manage that as they transition into ongoing support positions?
Yes, sir. Brady Phillips, for the record. During this current biennium that we're forthcoming, we would be looking at the one-shot dollars as discussed. Moving forward during the next legislative cycle, that would be a discussion point because those positions would be moving into OCIO. They operate under a rate structure. So that would all move forward into their budget request for the next legislative cycle on how to incorporate that and adjust statewide as needed for the assumption of those positions.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that is something that we'll probably need to dig into a little bit just because of some of the nuances around that. But yeah, I think that concludes my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I believe Assemblymember Backus has a question.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I can't remember which one of you, Mr. Phillips or Mr. Bowles, had talked about the reports, but it was on the slide. They're not numbered, but it's the slide that shows the different report statuses, including the current one from Plant Moran. And I believe it said if you look at the history of budget items, it remained green throughout. However, I'm looking at December 2024 and January 2025 with respect to that budget item, and both of those were in the yellow category. And there were some concerning items reported by Plant Moran, including that the volume of production support needs after Phase 1A go live was unplanned. Resources have pivoted from future phases to address Phase 1 issues, thereby risking the extension of the project resources and contracts. And obviously, one of our big concerns is always going to be that budget item, and I understand that the contract with CGI is supposed to be a guaranteed maximum sum, and then we also had the $10 million set aside for change orders, and I think our balance now is $8.7 million. And so just kind of planning for the future in light of these concerns. I see that it's now green, but we haven't had a chance to look at that report. Do you anticipate that the change orders that may occur for the delays and/or moving up some of the phases to be simultaneous will cause a complete exhaustion of that change order sum? Are we going to be looking at a request from CGI in the future for additional funds up and above the contract sum?
Thank you for the question. Brian Bowles, for the record, through the chair to you. With respect to the budget being yellow in Plant Moran's assessment, that is one that we disagreed with at the time. And I think their comment in that particular instance that you quoted was what we did just describe to you, that production support body of work was unplanned and did hit our team hard, and that is why we had a serious decrease in capacity and project work while we turned our attention to the stabilization. So they were right on with the fact that there was unplanned work that was unexpected in its amount and intensity for our project team, and how that related to the budget itself. We questioned. We did not agree with that. The budget and the cost outlay to get us down the road was not in question. With regards to your question about our change control bucket, which is how we refer to it on the project, we do anticipate that likely to be completely used up for phase 2. At the moment, we are projecting that our request that you have before you for the total amount, we will stay under that even with the planned enhancements that you see on the slides. So we're not intending at this moment with our projections to ask for anything more than the continuance of the funding from previous session in whatever form that takes, whether it's us not using a portion and reverting out of our current authorized budget for this fiscal year and moving that forward, or the request from the remaining that's in the reserve contingency fund. If we do experience that over the next few years, then we will be making that known to you and be before you at an IFC.
And Madam Chair, may I have a follow-up question? And I do appreciate that, because when I did hear the presentation last session, I do like that we're moving forward as a state trying to cap our liabilities to these software companies. So I do appreciate that, that hopefully we weren't going to have to pay more. But along those lines, I'm assuming once everything gets up and going, and actually now, one thing I don't think I've seen in here is any enhancement for the licensing fee. So when we're totally up and going, done with phase 2, do you know what we are going to be looking at to CGI for ongoing maintenance costs? Because I can't remember if this was one of those systems that we were going to take over all of the upkeep and training of our own state employees so we didn't incur that, or like what that kind of contract value is going to look like for the next bienniums.
Brady Phillips, for the record. The currently contracted rate is approximately $5.2 million for a software as a service on an annual basis moving forward. That carries us into FY 2028 with CGI, where our current contract expires and where that will be renegotiated moving forward. There would be no anticipation, though, of moving this back stateside as we currently operate with the legacy systems, as that is what has caused many of our issues with the legacy systems. And there's not really that option with the Advantage4 system through CGI.
And then, Chair, one more question. And also earlier to one of my colleagues' questions, because I'm fixated on the change order aspect, just because I know that's where sometimes these contracts can slip away and incur costs. When asked, because the balance, as I understand, left for the phase 2 was the $8.7 million, and maybe we're chipping away at it right now and this enhancement, but the response was that there was going to be $2.5 million for training. And I was kind of surprised, and I don't know if that was something else you were talking about, but did our contract, the underlying contract, not anticipate to be include training from CGI to our state employees?
Thank you, Brady Phillips, for the record. The original contract did not include training on it. We anticipated as a state unit that we were going to be able to provide training statewide, and as we got into this project, quickly realized that that was not going to happen. We did not have the resources to make that a reality. So the first change order we did was a total of $2.5 million over a 3-year period for CGI to provide end user training in person, and then they are also assisting us with a lot of the ongoing training and job aids and things of that nature for our state employees.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for the courtesy.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for the information. I know that there could be more questions going along the way, but we know where you work, so we will contact you if that happens. Thank you very much, and once again, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, with that, I will, next up is the Cannabis Compliance Board. Welcome, Mr. Hum. That's funny for me to say that. And Mr. Miles and Ms. Figueroa. So thank you. And I'll open the hearing on budget account 4207. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I'm James Hum, Executive Director of the Cannabis Compliance Board. Some quick background on myself. Governor Lombardo named me to lead the CCB in December of 2023, whereas in the prior 6 years, I had the pleasure of serving the state in various roles at both the Attorney General's Office and the Governor's Office of Economic Development. Joining me today, to my left, is Deputy Director Michael Miles, our Chief Financial Officer Lisa Figueroa, our Chief of Investigations Dave Staley is behind me, while our Chief of Health and Safety Kara Cronkite joins us from Las Vegas. I'm proud to present to you today a primarily flat budget with 5 decision units. We are able to do this because of the productivity of these individuals accompanying me, as well as our incredible CCB staff. We constantly ask more of them, and they always deliver, so I truly thank them for that. Now, Chair, in an ode towards efficiency, my plan was to walk the committee through a quick budget summary of each of these decision units and then take questions. I also have our agency presentation on hand to support any questions that arise and to add any details that you may need. So quick, brief overview, mission statement, who we are as the Cannabis Compliance Board. The Nevada Cannabis Compliance Board governs Nevada's cannabis industry through strict regulation of all areas of its licensing and operations, protecting the public health and safety of our citizens and visitors while holding cannabis licensees to the highest ethical standards. Industry Regulation Compliance Enforcement, Decision Unit E229. This decision unit eliminates 2 full-time equivalent compliance enforcement investigator 2 positions, saving more than $667,000 in fiscal years 26 and 27. The enforcement positions are no longer needed for the Investigations and Enforcement Division because the volume of consumption lounge license applications did not meet projections. Some additional detail, 2 retail attached lounges have been issued a final license to operate in unincorporated Clark County. 21 others, 14 retail attached and 7 independent, have passed suitability by the board and have received conditional licenses. The remaining 17 lounge applications, 4 retail attached, 3 independent, and 10 social equity, are currently attempting to meet location and minimum funding requirements. It is difficult to project when new consumption lounges are open. However, it is the CCB's goal that all consumption lounges open as soon as the licensees are ready. Equipment replacement, Decision Unit E710. This decision unit replaces computers, monitors, and ancillary equipment on a 5-year replacement schedule, about $83,000 and $85,000 for the next 2 fiscal years. Decision Unit E715. This decision unit replaces guns and tasers based on the recommended replacement schedule, and that'll be $36,000 in FY27. Reclassifications, Decision Unit E807. This decision unit funds the reclassification of 1 compliance audit investigator 2 to a business process analyst 2 to enhance the agency's utilization of data in the seed to sale inventory system. It's about $14,000 per year over the next biennium. This is being requested so that the agency itself can adapt both internally and externally as well to the needs of the industry. This will be an effort to incorporate even more data-driven analysis for ourselves, as well as access to that data for the industry. We've gotten several requests to include public data reporting on our website, which we intend to do by the end of this year. This individual will help us do that, as well as maintain that and enhance our audit and inspection processes. Operations, out-of-state travel. This decision unit funds ongoing out-of-state travel, which reflects fiscal year 2025 non-IFC approved work program C68332. And we're asking for totals of $31,000 for each of those years. Our org chart, I'm proud to share that the CCB is a desirable place to work. Right now, we are hiring 2 candidates recruited at the state's latest job fair. They're going to start on March 31st. With our anticipated hirings, other than those vacancies that I mentioned earlier, we will have no vacancies by the end of the month. So we want to give a huge shout out to DHRM for the speed in which they helped us get these folks hired at the last job fair, which was an incredible event. We had a robust number of applications and people come visit us. Also want to thank this body as well as the governor for the raises from last session. That has certainly helped with recruiting. So we thank everyone for that. Revenues and expenditures, the agency generates $4.4 million. Our operating budget is 11.6, and then we collect 43.7 million in wholesale taxes collected. So our transfer to the state education fund last year was 31 million. Actual revenue and expenses, happy to go through each and any one of these if you'd like, but this is kind of the quick overview of where we stand on our revenue and expenditures. And with that, Chair, that concludes my prepared remarks.
Thanks very much. We will start with Speaker Yeager.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr. Hum and team. I have just a couple of questions about the cannabis consumption licenses. Obviously was here working on that in 2021 with a lot of my colleagues that are on this committee. As you indicated, I think only 2 of them are up and operational. They are both wonderful facilities. If you haven't had a chance to go, you should go check them out. I know you guys have been there, but to committee members. So if you could talk a little bit about, these, I guess, 18 prospective and 20 conditional, what have been some of the challenges experienced by those prospective licensees in meeting the statutory and regulatory requirements to get to a final license? And as a follow-up to that, how has your agency been able to try to help with that? Because we'd certainly like to see more of those open.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker. James Hum for the record. To be clear, we've been to those facilities during work hours. Just to clarify, we actually do have updated numbers. So we actually have the 2 open, and then we have another 21 in conditional. And what that means by them being in conditional is that they could effectively open at any time. The board has approved them to move to conditional status. We would still need to wait on their operational plans, and then again their final walkthrough for them to open. But we have 21 that are kind of locked, loaded, and ready to go, if you will. So those have a pretty clear path. To your question, the regulatory hurdles, I wouldn't say it's a hurdle necessarily, but we do have in regulation a $200,000 minimum that is a part of the suitability requirement for those lounges to open. And again, 23 of those have met it. And let me just be clear as well, that $200,000, CCB does not see a dime of that money. That is just operational liquidity that the business itself will need and use to facilitate and open that business. So also speaking to that, to say that there are hurdles wouldn't necessarily be from us. We've spoken to many of these folks and some of the ones that are still on prospective licenses. They're working diligently to pursue this, but as with any sort of startup or smaller business, they're running into, in this specific area, finding viable locations. So again, the majority of those conditionals are 14 retail attached. So again, those are going to be the ones that are attached to the dispensary, so they actually have an easier through path because in many cases they have that location. So for the independent independents, what they're really running into is both that combination of finding the original startup capital, again, experienced by a lot of other small businesses, small business types throughout the state, as well as finding suitable locations. As far as what we're doing, I know that that has come up several times, not just in this committee, but in other committees, and some bill presentations as well about the concern of that minimum requirement of liquidity. So we're certainly happy to consider or to continue those conversations. And to see if, we need to open up the regulations again and potentially look at either reducing that or eliminating that. Our ultimate goal, I come from economic development, which is always job creation, getting small businesses open. And so this is extremely important to myself. And so when I talk and I look at the team, I think our best ability right now, rather than to consider it as a hurdle, is our best ability is availability. And, we've had many meetings with these folks. We've helped them. There's certain requirements for, exhaust and circulation and ventilation in these areas. So we are open, available. We've met with these folks many times, anyone that's reached out to us during their suitability reviews, as well as they kind of approach opening, keeping them aware of what all they need to do to continue that process to open.
Thank you, Chair. If I could ask a follow-up, and I guess first I just want to say thank you for that. And this obviously is not a policy committee, but to the extent you can continue to work on helping to adjust some of those requirements, I think they were put in a statute for good reason. But as we often learn in this building, sometimes good reasons prevent folks from being able to get up and operational. So I just have a couple more questions, and just one is a quick one. The two that are open already, I believe, are retail attached lounges. Have you guys had any issues with the operations over there? Have you had to do any enforcement, or how has that been going?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker. James Hum for the record. No reported issues. And again, they've been terrific operators. I don't want to jinx it, but everything's been smooth thus far. And again, part of the nod of why we're giving those two positions back is even as we expect this to grow, we'll be able to move those other enforcement officers that we'll hire on a rolling basis, and we don't ideally anticipate too many issues at those lounges. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And then one last question, if I could, Chair. I know it's a little bit of a guessing game in terms of when other cannabis consumption lounges may open, but you did note that a number of those conditional licenses are attached, retail attached, which obviously gets around the requirement of having to find a location. Do you have any sort of anticipated timeline when we might expect to see some additional cannabis consumption lodges become operational?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker. Honestly, at this point, it's up to the business. As I said, the 14 are pretty much ready to go. We'll look at their operations plan and then conduct a final walkthrough, but we have not received any of those as of today or for the next cycle. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, and I believe Senator Buck has a question.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering how much money has been dispersed to the State Education Fund since the beginning of the program, of the marijuana program. I have constituents always saying the marijuana money is not going to education, and so really want that on the record.
Good morning, Lisa Figueroa for the record. Through the chair. To date, it was started at like 69 million, the first, then dropped to 49. Last year, 31. And this year, it's going to decline even further following some legislative changes that occurred last session, reducing and combining fees as well as the calculation for the tax transfer.
And how often is it dispersed to the education fund? Once a year, or when is it?
Again, Lisa Figueroa for the record. That is dispersed as the cash becomes available. Ideally, we would love to do it quarterly, but the reality is when we receive the tax funds, it's 3 months after taxation has received the taxes. So we receive July's in September and so on and so on. So we don't really receive that cash until the end of the first quarter. And then we still have the operational expenses that we need to make sure that we can facilitate payroll and all other operations. So this year, there was a little bit of a delay in the lag, and they were adjusting, taxation was adjusting the amounts that we were receiving. So it's actually the second quarter where we received those funds. It was lower than anticipated. So our realized cash available was very low. So we're finding over history since we started CCB that the funds typically become available in February, where we can do our first transfer. Then we try and do an immediate follow-up, say in May, June, and then our final one, because we receive our June funds from taxation in August, right before the fiscal year closing, and we do our final transfer of all remaining net available funds.
And if I may, Chair, so it goes into the education fund, and who manages that? Just so I can tell constituents this is going toward school safety, and you may not know this, I may have to ask the Department of Education, but who has discretion over these marijuana dollars when they get transferred to the fund?
James Hum for the record. Chair, I apologize. May I go direct? Okay, sorry. Thank you for the question, Senator. That would be a better question for utilization for the Department of Education. And to give you, I can direct you to your previous question as well. If you look at slide 19 of the presentation, we distributed an FY24 a total of $107.8 million. 76 of that was cannabis excise tax, and 31 million of that was cannabis resale tax. To kind of follow up on what Chief Figueroa says, we still have operational concerns the first 2 quarters of the year. So our goal is always to transfer as much as we can, third, fourth quarter, and then any rollovers that come, we do to close out the budget, kind of in the technically first quarter, but close out the last year. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. And I believe Senator Nguyen has a question.
Thank you. Sorry, I got to move over here a little bit. I just want to clarify. All, except for to run the CCB, all of the proceeds from cannabis go to education.
Thank you for the question, Senator. All but a very small amount. And if I can direct your attention to slide 8, there's a transfer to, there's a transfer to local governments, and then there's also a transfer to the health division. So the transfer to local governments is $5 million, and the transfer to the health division, Chief Figueroa, if I'm correct, is $185,000.
Yeah, I think we started out with 350, and then it's on a reimbursement base. Sorry, Lisa Figueroa for the record. Then it's on a reimbursement basis, and so it has reduced significantly over the last 2 sessions.
I just want to make sure that it's very clear. I know that there's an ongoing myth that I know all legislators, including, as referenced by Senator Buck, where people are like, where is that money going? Where is it going? Where is it going? And I just want to make sure it's very clear that with the exception of, honestly, a very minuscule amount of that money, it goes there. It goes to education.
Lisa Figueroa again for the record. Yes, that is correct. It does go to education, the local funds, local governments and health. There is a small amount that balances forward at the end of the fiscal year to retain for our reserve balance forward. I think we were about 1.5 million we are trying to increase it through this budget session to up to maybe a 45-day reserve just for operational.
And I also wanted to make clear, I know that initially when marijuana became recreationally legal here in our state, after a vote of the people, pretty overwhelmingly, as we began this regulatory process, the amount that was predicted to come in, what we receive now from those taxes, far surpasses what we ever anticipated we would get from the cannabis industry. Isn't that correct, too?
So, Senator, I can't speak to that as far as anticipation. I know it has decreased slightly, but yes, to follow up on your earlier question, every dime that is not used specifically for operational costs goes to the state education fund by statute. We have the numbers again directly right here, so thank you for mentioning that. Yes, and again, given the importance of our jobs and given the importance of funding education in our state, I assure you, myself and the team are budget hawks on this. We want every possible dollar to go to the schools, and we are cognizant that any dollar we spend operational doesn't go. So we are very hyper aware of our budget and where those dollars are intended to go.
Thank you. I just didn't want there to be some misconception that some of the bills that we passed pretty overwhelmingly bipartisan in a bipartisan nature in the last session was meant to bring some more predictability to these funds to help with the growing illicit market, and that it was in no way trying to take money away from children in education.
Yes, absolutely. James Humm for the record. Absolutely. Thank you, Senator.
Okay, thank you. I do have another question, if that's okay, Chair. Thank you. We were talking about some of these positions, and I know we were talking about how there haven't been as many lounges. And I think, if I heard that correctly, there are 2. Is that correct?
James Humm for the record. That's correct, Senator.
And I can see that there are 3 additional compliance enforcement investigator 2 positions that you have indicated have been vacant for 1 year. How come these are not being predicted for elimination?
Thank you for the question, Senator. So when I first got here in 2023, I had asked our chief investigations, Chief Staley, who's sitting behind us, what really the through path was for that. One of my first meetings that I took at the CCB entailed the illicit market. So really what I tasked him and the team with was coming up with a plan just to see how we could deploy those, what statutory limits and obligations or authorities we had. So really, rather than spend those dollars as we kind of hashed that out, we spent the last year really formulating a plan. And again, kudos to him and his team. We know that we have a very solid plan moving forward, what we're going to task those specific agents, what they will be doing, but then again, also being cognizant that we are comfortable giving 2 of those folks back, but then also how we are going to best utilize them to move forward. And we also have, Bill AB 76 that will assist us with, the civil fines and penalties, which is, working through the regulatory process now. And again, so it was really to determine our authorities and deploying our sworn officers appropriately where we needed them. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. I guess I need more clarification because, 31 of those positions were in the last biennium, in the last legislative session, were approved to support the implementation and administration of these cannabis consumption lounges. And I'm just, how are you determining how to repurpose that workload for those 31 employees? Because I'm assuming you're not just splitting them up and having 15 here and 16 here to really go after the 2 lounges that we have. So I'm curious on how you're determining to repurpose that workload, or if they're going to be doing something else, or if you really have the need for those 31 positions given the fact that there are 2 lounges.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator. So again, that was those 23 of those were requested back in 2021. And since 2021, although only 2 consumption lounges have come online, 46 additional license types or licenses have come online. Also, as mentioned, we have 21 conditional licenses on the consumption lounges that could come open at any time, and we also have 76 inactive licenses right now. So at any time, any of those 76 plus 46 plus 21 could come online, 76 plus 21 could come online. Again, I wasn't here, but I believe the plan was, and kind of what the plan that's been executed is to cross-train all of these people. So in effect, all of the inspectors can inspect any type of license type, but for the labs. So we have very specific for the labs, but the other 5, including consumption lounges. Over the years, this, to your point earlier, this industry has evolved for need. So again, I assure you, none of those folks are sitting idle. And not only are we prepared for that, we've been able to manage the workload over that with the onset of those, again, 46 different licenses. And then also speaking specifically to the consumption lounges, once the legislation was passed to get the regulations set, to do all of those other things that created the uplift to get people ready for the application process for the random number generative events, all of the things that surrounded getting those ready for the ability for them to open. So again, these folks have done an incredible amount of work. I think I said earlier, we keep asking more of them and they never say no. So we are full deployment of those positions right now. If all 38 came online tomorrow, you may see me at the next IFC, but right now I'm comfortable with the amount of staff that we have that we're able to handle the workload. And then again, just one last thing, there's other pieces of legislation floating through here, looking at checklists, trainings, things like that. And again, we constantly ask more, but I'm confident that we have the staff and the ability and training and to handle not only the workload that we currently have, but to uplift the industry as we move forward. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions from the committee about this budget? Okay, seeing none, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for the information. We appreciate it. And with that, I will close the hearing on budget account 4207. Thank you. All right, with that, I will go to our last agenda item, and that is public comment. For those providing public comment, please remember to state and spell your name for the record. To call in to provide testimony for public comment, please dial 888 475-4499, and then please enter, when prompted, 846-7654-5207 and press pound. And when prompted for the participant ID, please press pound again. So I will begin with public comment here in Carson City. And I don't see anyone coming forward. And I will go to Las Vegas. Is there anyone in the Las Vegas audience? And with that, I will go to the phone lines. AVH, is there anyone on the phone lines for public comment? AVH?
Guess I am.
Anymore? Oh, there it is.
Maybe they didn't hear you.
Good morning, Senate Committee. My name is Matthew Winterhawk, Winterhawk for the record. I'm a Las Vegas, Nevada resident and constituent, as well as being involved in the cannabis industry since 1993 to 2017. So I have a bone to pick with the fact that the funding. One thing I'd like to drop on the record is that most of these establishments are operating using cashless ATMs, which is money that's not on the record with any of you. Hundreds of millions of dollars are being trafficked through there. I don't count that those are on the budget sheets. It's not something that anyone's aware of. I've reported it to the FBI in 2020. It got thrown out. They never did anything with it. And so looking at the fact that they're bringing this up again, and I can already see the inconsistencies, like the funding for education being cut 31 million down to 16.7 million for 26-27. So that's a 50% decrease in funding for education. Yet cannabis tax revenues continue to be on the high. So where's that money going? Bloated government right now, with the salaries going back and forth that they're utilizing, have gone from 8.2 million on their budget sheet for 23 to 24 to over 12 million, 26-27. The out-of-state travel funding over 44,593 per year. Cannabis being a huge issue, and the taxpayer dollars need to be know where these national trips are going. We need to be informed as taxpayers. Cutting the enforcement investigators while keeping political bureaucrats is insane to me. We've got 2 compliance enforcement investigators that were eliminated, E229, for their record. Meanwhile, administrative personnel costs are increasing. Less enforcement means less oversight for illegal operations, leading to regulatory loopholes. It increases the reserves while cutting public funding. The CCB is currently hoarding money. Projected reserves jump from 2.3 million in 24-25 to over 5 million in 26-27. So why are they holding that money? Is it for public education? Is it health? Is it business support? We need to figure that out. And where's the transparency? The total civil penalties corrected right now are $553,000, nearly $500,000. But where does that money go? Once again, who's being fined? Why? And businesses should know if the fines are being arbitrarily enforced against certain businesses, and the clarification and transparency of that should be there. So this is public comment, so I can't exactly speak against the budget, but as a person who is very well versed in what is going on in cannabis and this market and the illegal loopholes and the cashless ATMs and the hidden funds, I think it's something that needs to be heavily scrutinized and looked at. And that's my statement for today. Thank you so much for letting me comment.
Thank you very much. Next caller, AVH. Is there another caller on the line?
Thank you, Chair. There are no other callers to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will close this hearing. On Monday, I would like to thank everyone, and on Monday, we will be hearing the budget presentations from the State Treasurer's Office, State Controller's Office, Gaming Control Board, and Department of Native American Affairs. Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend. This meeting is adjourned. here.